I call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo for March 18th, 2025. I welcome any committee members. There are no committee members in the audience. I welcome those of you who are watching at home. Will the Secretary please take roll call?
Commissioner Vandermeulen.
Here.
Commissioner Murphy.
Here.
Commissioner Edsel.
Here.
Chair Limon.
Here. Okay. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand. Hand to your heart. Face the flag. Begin.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to the consent calendar. Those are items that are considered general business and are acted upon together without discussion unless we pull an item. The first item is a Planning Commission minutes for February 18th. And we also have the 2024 General Plan Annual Progress Report.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Commissioner Edsel?
Yes.
Chair Limon?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
I wasn't here, so I won't be able to vote on that.
And Commissioner Vandermeulen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will note that we received a public comment on that General Plan Annual Progress Report. Okay, moving on to public comments. This is the time for members of the public to present a matter to the Planning Commission, which does not appear as a regular item. I do not see any members of the public. Are there any present who I don't see? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment. Now I'll open up the public hearing. We have two items for consideration on our agenda tonight. One is a general plan safety element update, and the second is a proposed conditional use permit 436 for a Chevron gas station off-site alcohol sales. If a member of the public were to come in and desire to speak, they should complete a public hearing comment card and present it to the clerk. So the first item is a general plan safety element update, and we will start with a planning staff report.
Good evening, Chair Limon, members of the Planning Commission. Tonight, staff is going to give you a presentation on the safety element update. And tonight we have Lexi Journey from Rincon Consultants. Their firm has been assisting the city with the preparation of the safety element. They're well-versed in helping other cities prepare their safety elements. Lexi has done several across the state. And she's going to be giving us an overview tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for letting me present on the city safety element update tonight. Again, my name is Lexi Journey from Rincon Consultants. I've been working on safety elements for the last 10 years is my whole time at Rincon, and I live here in Ventura County. So I also get to work on a lot of safety element issues like wildfire with different folks in Ventura County. So one of my favorite topics. I have about 15-minute presentation to go over the safety element update, including why the safety element's being updated and how it's complying with new legislation. And then I'll talk about a couple technical analyses that were completed to inform the safety element update, including the wildfire hazard analysis and the evacuation analysis. Then I'll do a brief overview of the topics that are included in the safety element update and highlight some of those new policies as well. Then take a look at the timeline of the safety element update and all of the reviewers and next steps, and then have plenty of time for discussion and Q&A. So here's a brief overview of all the different regulations regarding city safety elements of the general plan. There has been a lot already that's been standing since general plans were created, but then there's been some new legislation around safety elements in the last decade. So the standard safety element legislation is that the safety element has to address hazards such as geological and seismic hazards, flooding, fire, hazardous materials and waste, aircraft hazards, and evaluate emergency response. There's also regulations that it has to include discussion of the fire hazard severity maps that are developed by the state, and also include information around critical infrastructure and emergency response and responsibility of fire protection, which is similar to some newer legislation about requiring update of wildfire mapping and ensuring that goals and policies are also updated to address wildfire hazards. Another legislation is that the safety element has to align with the local hazard mitigation plan. So for Ventura County, we have a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan to ensure that emergency response and evacuation is accurately reflected in the safety element. And then some newer legislation is that a climate change vulnerability assessment has to be conducted. So it's not looking at just existing hazards, but how those hazards are projected to change in the future due to climate change. And that the safety element has to be updated at least every 8 years, or along when the housing element is updated or that local hazard mitigation plan is updated. And then lastly, the two most recent legislation is regarding identifying neighborhoods with less than 2 routes in or out and conducting an evacuation capacity analysis. So now digging into the technical information, starting with the fire hazard severity zone maps. These are created by the state. Until recently, these maps hadn't been updated for over a decade, but as of recent, the state has updated what's called the state responsibility areas last year. So designating the very high, and moderate zones in the state responsibility area. And then just this year, CAL FIRE is coming out with the local responsibility area updated mapping. So for Camarillo and the Central Coast, those maps just came out last week, which is the ones that are shown here. And there's still Southern California where they don't have their most updated maps yet. So these are hazard area maps. So they represent physical conditions that create the likelihood of the fire behavior or fire hazard. So that includes looking at the standard physical conditions such as the vegetation, which creates the fuel model, also the topography of the area and climate, such as weather and fire history, to create the fire behavior. But these don't evaluate risk, and meaning it's not showing the risk to, say, infrastructure like roadways. It's really looking at, okay, based on those factors that I mentioned, where is the more likelihood of fire? And so how these maps are used is that the state has construction design standards, and depending on where your property is within these zones, that's going to dictate what those construction standards are. And so you have to comply with the state and local design structures in the very high and high zones. It also influences what defensible state standards you have to comply with, and as well as real estate disclosures when you buy or sell your house. And so that's the standard state maps. This is a wildfire hazard analysis that was conducted by TSS Consultants, who's a wildfire consulting firm around for over 40 years. And so the city decided to go above and beyond those standard state maps to conduct a more specific local wildfire hazard analysis. So this isn't required for the safety element, but it does go beyond. But it helps to, again, because the other maps are very state level, state model, to be able to look at the local level and have a more customized look at wildfire hazard and risk within the city. So this hazard analysis takes all the factors that the state has, but also goes deeper and looks at vulnerability of roads, within the city, also those neighborhoods that may have only have one way in and one way out. This analysis also looked at the electrical lines that are exposed and that have a lot of vegetation around it as a potential risk, as well as drainages within the city, because those create a lot of vegetation, they're hard to access, and are a factor in wildfire risk as well. So based on this analysis done by TSS, they found that 95% of the city is designated as a low hazard under their analyses. But there are 2 high areas in the city due to those drainages, and that the medium and high areas outside of the city are really due to the terrain, because you have the vegetation on those steep slopes that can create a higher wildfire risk with that topography. So this doesn't have any impacts for regulatory compliance, but it does help inform where priority projects should occur in the city in terms of where vegetation management should occur and where protection of those assets should occur as well. And then the last technical analysis that I'll go over is the evacuation analysis. This was conducted by Fair and Peers, a traffic consulting firm that is doing evacuation analysis all across the state. And this was conducted to comply with AB 747. And they looked at a Santa Ana winds-driven event for wildfire evacuation if it were to occur in the east side of the city. So if that type of wildfire event was to occur and the neighborhoods of Camarillo Springs, Leisure Village, and Upland had to evacuate, what would happen on those roadways under that scenario? So that looked at evacuating to the 101 and then having to move west and not being able to go east on the 101, assuming that's where the fire would be occurring. And the results of that study showed that 50% of the evacuation routes designated would exceed that roadway capacity. So that would take longer for evacuation and have evacuation impacts. And how that's connected to the safety element is that it has policy implications in terms of continuing to look at evacuation, providing education, and doing a lot of coordination with the county and other partners to continually address evacuation issues. So you can see some examples is that new development has to have 2 ingress-egress routes, looking at where secondary access can be potentially added within the city, continuing to look at emergency service needs, continuing education and coordination. Now for topics covered in the safety element, here is how the safety element is organized. So we have these different categories and policies under each one. First one being citywide safety and climate change, where the policies address heat, drought, and air quality. We have geologic and seismic hazards, flooding hazards, fire hazards, hazardous materials and waste, aircraft hazards, and emergency response. And most of the safety element update policies occurred within the citywide safety and climate change section, again, to address urban heat and drought, and as you can imagine, considerable updates in the fire hazard section as well. Now I'll go over what these new policies look like. So in the first section, here are some examples of the new hazard, air quality, and emergency response policies. First one, to encourage new development outside floodplains, wildfire risk, and fault zones. Another one is to increase regional partnerships to provide air quality retrofits to low-income members. Also encouraging resident enrollment in medical programs for personal protective equipment, or PPE. And increasing emergency communications and requiring emergency kits in households. And also under this section, these are the policies that address urban heat and drought. Policies are to regularly evaluate and update heat and drought related local plans, looking for opportunities to expand the city's urban forests, conducting heat illness recognition and education, encouraging alternatives to AC units to reduce grid demand, and exploring the use of new cooling infrastructure and technology and increasing drought-resistant landscaping. And under geologic, seismic, and flooding hazards, the new policies in this section include providing building updates for new existing buildings per the California Building Code, requiring updates to minimize impacts from landslides and earthquakes, retrofit older buildings with updated seismic safety technology, prohibiting construction of new facilities in those flood zones and floodplains, maintaining compliance with local plans, and increasing education of local flood hazard in zones. So pretty standard, so more of a cleanup of the policy language in this section. And then for fire hazards, this is where a lot of the increased policies occurred. A part of this is due to the safety element now has to go through CAL FIRE and Board of Forestry review. So they have a pretty standardized checklist of all of the different policies they want to see in safety elements. And so that's where these come from, and it has gone through their review, which I'll speak to in a second. But these new policies in the fire hazard section include ensuring updated construction design to minimize damage on new developments per the California Building Code, ensuring adequate water supplies to new developments to meet fire demand, enhancing the municipal code to align with the Ventura County Fire Protection District standards, requiring all homes to have adequate signage, such as the address numbers, partnering with Ventura County Regional Fire Safe Council to develop a Camarillo-specific community wildfire protection plan, increasing defensible space near homes and roadways in the WUI, or Wildland Urban Interface, per CAL FIRE's direction and the county's direction, continuing to pursue grant fundings to implement all of these safety element policies regarding wildfire, as well as increasing public education of fire hazards and evacuation routes, continuing to review and update the city's emergency operations plan, and can coordinate with the Ventura County Fire Protection District to ensure they have all the necessary resources available, staffing, equipment, and funding, and potential partnerships for grant there as well. And also identifying the very high fire hazard severity zones in the city's municipal code, which the county is doing right now. And so that is also a requirement for the city. So here's the timeline of the safety element updates and the reviews that occurred. So city staff first reviewed the safety element last year in May. Then it was reviewed by the Ventura County Fire Protection District in the summer. It was also reviewed by the Ventura County Sheriff's Office in the summer. And then the city's Public Works Department reviewed after that. And then we went through the formal CAL FIRE process for review. And the safety element was formally accepted by the Board of Forestry at the end of last year in December. So the next steps then, after the Board of Forestry officially approved it, we are here at Planning Commission to get your recommendation. And the plan is to go to City Council for approval next month. That's it for my presentation, and look forward to your Q&A.
Thank you very much. Commissioner?
I had a question on that one slide you had with the local wildfire analysis.
Mhm.
And then in the bullet points, it says that 95% of the city was low hazard. The map looked like it was less than that percentage, 95. Was some of that in the county? Is that why? You know, the part that had the yellow color and then it had the reds? It was,
Yeah, I see on the map, I think because of the scale of the map, that it looks mostly yellow, and it's hard to see those red areas where it's high, right?
just
Like it
looking at
mostly
it-
looks all yellow, but there are some red areas. And so in the report, they've calculated that it's at
Oh.
the 95%.
because I mean, just visually, it looked like it was maybe 60, 40, or 70.
I think it's because the whole planning boundary shows outside of city limits.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe it included some of the county.
Yeah,
plan.
yeah,
Okay.
the whole analysis does include some of the
Okay.
county. Mhm.
Thank you.
I had a question, and I don't know that it's your question to answer.
Mhm.
I don't know if somebody in the city knows this answer, but when we had the Hill Fire a few years ago, so I'm in Leisure Village, Santa Rosa Road comes down. So it did affect a lot of Santa Rosa Valley, and they were evacuating. We didn't have to evacuate. However, there were a few people that wanted to leave, especially when one of the hills right at the back of Leisure Village was burning. There was no way to get out onto Santa Rosa Road. In a case like this, whose responsibility would it be to maybe open up the eastbound lanes for westway travel to get some of that moving if it involved a larger amount of vehicles?
So that decision will be made by our local police department in conjunction with emergency command that's responsible for the incident.
Okay. We have so many questions on that, so I thought it'd be handy to have the answer. Thank you. And I think that's the only question I have right now.
Commissioner Murphy?
Okay, so forgive my lack of terminology here, but I'd like to go back to the local responsibility area map. Now is that prepared by TSS in their fire hazard study of about a year ago?
No, so it is confusing because there's two fire hazard maps. The fire hazard severity maps, those are produced by the state. So those started being produced in the 80s and 90s when we had those big fires and the Oakland fire. So the state has always provided those fire hazard severity maps for those different building code regulations. And then the other analysis, that one was done by TSS. That's more a local model that looks at little more specifics of roadways, drainage, more fine scale vegetation data.
Right, and so that analysis was done a year ago, and then we had the November mountain fire. So none of the mountain fire data is reflected yet into the safety element. That would be in the next safety element?
Correct. It's funny because the actual fires don't really affect those analyses because the change in the analyses is that change in vegetation, right? So you have a fire and you have right now less vegetation because it burned. And so as of right now, if you ran that model, it would show a lower risk because that's all been burned. But it's gonna all grow back. So if you're looking like long term, it doesn't really change the analyses. Short term, yeah, it might show a little bit less risk because there's less vegetation, but it's gonna grow back quickly. So then it wouldn't change the results of the analyses.
Yeah, okay. So the local hazard map, are there two different maps, or is there the SRA and the local hazard maps? There's two different maps. Are they both prepared by CAL FIRE?
Those ones, the state and the local are both procured by CAL FIRE, correct?
Okay, and then they update their findings periodically.
Yeah, they're supposed to update it technically, I think, every 5 years, but they haven't updated them in over a decade, but hopefully now they're gonna update them more regularly.
So the state responsibility area map, that has not changed since.
That one,
I'm sorry.
change it, and
Yep.
it was released last year as well.
And there was something happening this month with, I thought I saw something March 2025 where additional analysis, perhaps including the mountain fire effects.
Yeah, so the ones that were released this month are the local responsibility areas.
Yeah.
So first they updated all the maps that are outside of city, county boundaries, that's that state area. And now the CAL FIRE is releasing the maps within city boundaries.
Okay. And that will reflect the mountain fire? Will incorporate whatever we learned from the mountain fire?
At the statewide scale and the vegetation data they have, it's not going to make a difference for those results. Like they know that they know the fire history, they know the data is in there. When they ran the model, I don't know the exact date they ran the model. If it was, because they just came out in March, I don't know if they ran it at the end of last year, but overall, it wouldn't be changing that like large scale statewide data set that they have.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
No, no further questions.
I do have a number of questions. So one, can you explain again the purpose of the wildfire hazard analysis? Like how is that being used in relation to the safety element?
Yeah, so it's going above and beyond what's required of the safety element, and it's used to inform policies and look at areas where you potentially want to do more vegetation management, and it really helps with grant funding as well. When you're going for grant funding for projects, you can showcase, we are doing additional analysis, these are what our results show, these are areas where we need to fund different projects. So it's really an add-on to what's required of the safety element.
Okay, so vegetation management, that makes sense for funding. The reason I'm asking is because it did seem a little limited, especially if it's used for funding, and I understand there are numerous other tools and information that could be used for funding purposes and seeking additional resources. I think going to Commissioner Murphy's comment about the mountain fire, clearly, our community has experienced that disaster and has been impacted by the recent disasters in other areas as well. And so I believe 95% was designated as low hazard, right? And that's based on vegetation. Is that right? As I understood it?
Yeah,
That's
it's
the
based
basic
on the
methodology.
vegetation, which influences the fuels. It's based on topography, so where the areas that are going to have more fire due to steeper topography, and then wind and climate effects too. When you're having those wind, like Santa Ana winds or other big wind-driven events, how that influences with topography, which creates fire behavior.
Okay.
So it's all incorporated
Wind
in there.
as well. Yeah, that was surprising to me because as we saw during the mountain fire, and unfortunately there were some lower lying areas, Spanish Hills that were impacted through, I think, wind. And I didn't see that area covered in the map. Again, going to the comment about whether it reflects reality, what we just experienced.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. It's a pretty in-depth analysis once you look into it. It's pretty long and there's a lot of different data in it. So we just showed like the overarching hazard, but if you go into like each of those factors, it breaks it down further and it shows more of like, okay, here are the different winds and where they're going to affect, here where the different types of vegetation, and that's a risk. I think it also, what I really like about it is when it goes in those factors of like, here are the roadways that we're concerned about, here are the neighborhoods we're concerned about, even the electrical lines and the drainages. That's pretty above what you see in a lot of wildfire hazard analyses. So I told you here, and like maybe the overarching map maybe doesn't paint that picture, but when you dig into the rest of the results, it really gives you a lot of information that can help inform the fire prevention programs and projects that you do in the city.
Okay, yeah, I did read that entire report. Yeah, I think it's just looking at the map. I think it could be misleading for a member of the public, right, to see what's the risk level. But as I understand you, that's not the purpose of it. It's not to inform the public at large. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it doesn't have any ramifications in terms of any regulations or anything like that.
And you mentioned vulnerable communities as well. And so when I read it, I didn't see the designations of different vulnerable communities to identify like high-risk areas, seniors, and this is reflected in the safety element, but at least in the study, it doesn't identify the hospital or other medical centers where there may be patients, for example, seniors, limited English population, speaking populations, or outdoor workers. So that was concerning to me.
Yeah, the way that they look at the communities, it does look at the communities that have the one way in, one way out is what they're considering vulnerable communities. And they didn't break it down into those other factors that you said. That is in the climate vulnerability assessment. We have those socio-demographic factors around the different communities and a discussion of vulnerability there.
In the safety element plan?
Yeah, in the climate vulnerability assessment.
That's a different assessment. That's not
Mhm.
before us right now. Okay. Yeah, I thought that was a very limited analysis in the wildfire study.
Yeah, it's definitely very technical. I think combined with the climate vulnerability assessment and the evacuation assessment, it is really comprehensive compared to other communities that we see. And maybe there's some ways that we can, improve on that overarching presentation. If maybe there's updates to the final results in the map with maybe more explanation of combining those together, or I don't know if there's any suggestions of additional, maybe a little bit more context information in the safety element. CAL FIRE also did say that this is one of the best safety elements they've seen, just because it has so much information and context to inform the policies. But if there's things that you feel like the community also is going to want to see, we could add a little bit of information for that as well, or at least point them to where to find it.
Yeah, at least a point of reference. Yeah, I think especially because St. John's Hospital is right below Hillside, or at least in proximity. And so I was surprised to not see medical centers, particularly the hospital, identified in it.
Yeah, there is a map with the fire hazard areas and the critical facilities. So that's where you would see that overlay of hazard and the hospital.
Okay. Okay. And for the how is that related to, because we're being, the recommendation is to adopt the resolution recommending adoption by the city council, as well as adoption of the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. Did I miss that? Was that included in our materials?
We're not asking to adopt the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. We're just, the resolution needs to include specific language that by reference, that the safety element includes adoption of that into the safety element. The multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan is already adopted by the city. That's already been done. But this resolution needs to include that particular language that this safety element includes by reference that adopted plan.
Okay, so it's incorporating by reference.
Yes, and it's purely in order for the city to be eligible for additional funding, that Cal OES specifically has language that the city needs to include in their resolution to be eligible for this additional funding. So it's just a technical inclusion of this wording that they want to see.
I see. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I have additional questions, but I want to pause to see if any of the other commissioners have questions at this point.
I don't at this time.
Okay. Can you clarify how the safety element is related to the city's emergency operations plan? Because it's referenced in there, but it's not clear whether the safety element then informs what's required for an update for the emergency operations plan.
Yeah, it doesn't require anything, except it says that it needs to be updated frequently, so that it's not saying this is exactly what needs to be in your emergency operations plan. It's not super prescriptive. It just says, here are the different things you need to look at, like continually look at evacuation, update it periodically. It's a higher level description of what should occur in the emergency operation plan. And then the emergency operation plans are more prescriptive guidance from Cal OES and other state agencies and not CAL FIRE.
I see. Okay. So when you're saying CAL FIRE, how are you relating the safety element plan to CAL FIRE then?
Yeah, that's a good question. New legislation now requires that CAL FIRE has to review the safety element. And so there's a very formal review process. We have our local representative, we send it to him. He has a very formal checklist. We go back and forth on that policy review. Once CAL FIRE approves it, then it goes to the Board of Forestry. There's a formal meeting and they talk about the safety element and it's approved by them.
Okay, you're saying
And
that
that's a new thing.
and
yeah.
the city's emergency operation plan doesn't have to be reviewed by CAL FIRE, is what you're saying?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. When is the emergency operations plan next going to be updated?
I don't know when it's planned for being updated.
Or do we know when it was last updated?
Yeah, I'd have to look at what it says in the safety element too.
We can look that up real quick and we'll let you know during
Okay.
the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. In going to review the review process that you outlined so clearly, was there any review or discussion feedback that was provided by the medical community?
Don't think directly. We didn't have it reviewed by the medical community. We had it reviewed by the Public Works Department and the County Sheriff's Office and the Fire Protection District, but not sent directly to any medical communities.
Okay, that seemed to me like a big gap because when there isn't an emergency, in addition to police and fire and other responders, of course, the medical community is critical, right? And so they are responding, for example, the mountain fire and any other disasters, they're at the front line as well. And so I thought that was a big gap and it's a missed opportunity and that may not be required, but I think it would be very helpful to have that expertise be able to weigh in.
Yeah, I think typically we rely on those agencies like Ventura County Fire Protection Districts that are on the front lines doing the emergency operations and the sheriffs doing the emergency that are working with those partners to provide that feedback. It's just typically how it's been done.
Yeah, I think that's a missed opportunity. I think that the health department or, having some focus group of the folks who are actually responding to the medical request for medical support would be very helpful.
So we do have an answer for you. So the Camarillo Emergency Operations Plan was adopted in 2021.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I think there's opportunity potentially to, if the city wants to, create that in the policies and identify, because there's a lot of policies surrounding community engagement and getting additional feedback. And so the medical community could be something that we call out specifically in those policies.
Okay, and creating the policies under the safety element plan?
Yeah. Yeah, and moving forward in terms of the implementation safety element of the plan.
Okay. Yeah, I think that should be explicitly incorporated in the
Okay.
safety element. Okay. And then going to the different objectives, there's an objective on the extreme heat, air quality, and drought. And I thought that was, I thought it would be cleaner to separate those out into different objectives. I know they're all related, but still have their own needs, air quality, drought, and heat. So I think it would be helpful to the public to understand those as as separate objectives. And I think there was a comment in the red line that was similar. So I was wondering if there was discussion, what the justification was for keeping it together.
I think it was just due to the length of the safety element and trying to find ways to condense it. So there's no technical reason.
Okay.
It was more of a formatting and to fit the style of how the safety element was conducted before. So if that's something that the city wants to do, it would be easy to separate those out.
Okay, yeah, I recommend separating them out into different objectives. Also, I didn't see clear language, and maybe it's in there and I just missed it, on engagement with communities and community-based organizations, NGOs, other experts on coordinating through the life cycle of a disaster. So, preparedness and resiliency through, when there's an anticipated event or a warning, during the actual event, and then immediately after, and then recovery. And there was language about mutual aid efforts in the emergency response objective, but I thought it would be much more helpful to explicitly lay out what the objective and the policies for that coordination will be. We saw during the mountain fire, our community is so generous, and there's a lot of care and mutual support, and there were multiple efforts to respond, to the emergency. And so there were a lot of donations and contributions, and there was some very planned and well coordinated efforts, but there was also a lot of confusion and misinformation and a lot of sort of like scrambling, and as a result, some of the contributions aren't meeting their stated aims, and centers that were receiving the contributions were overwhelmed and couldn't staff, and weren't able to properly organize, and we're just left with piles of stuff. So I imagine that in any future event, we'll continue to see those efforts by community members who want to support, and I think it would be extremely helpful to have a much more a clear process and protocols and community education, so that people's intentions of supporting their community members, can really be directed to have those efforts reach their stated aims or their intended aims and really leverage them. So that's my recommendation, is to include some more clear and directed language around coordination on mutual aid.
Okay, we do have it throughout the different sections, and then we have the last one that is emergency response. So that could be an opportunity to provide more of those specifics in policies under that section, and then within the implementation actions as well, because the safety element, that the policies get updated every several years or so, but those implementation actions that you're doing, that gets more updated frequently. So we can provide more specifics there and maybe connect to other plans where those are going to occur as well, like the emergency operation plans, the community wildfire protection plan, and hopefully get back to what you were saying before of connecting where all those different city opportunities, these things are happening.
So I just want to make sure, because that sounds great, but I want to make sure that there's clear enough language in the plan, because this is what is guiding the actions, right? Of this sets out what's required. And so I'd like to make sure that there's language where then we're going to have that policy implemented in the way that's intended. So if you think there's language in there already, I'd appreciate if you could just point me to it.
Okay, so the policies and the implementation actions. like for implementation actions, we have developed programs that inform and educate about risks, resources, roles, responsibilities, safety, evacuation routes, training programs. And we have the different departments that are responsible in the goals and policies. And then we have up using the city's website. So we have some specifics there. We talk about how to do that in the emergency operation plan. So maybe even more within the actions you're thinking.
Can you point me to where you're reading? It's
Yeah, it's on page 1163, implementing actions. We have D there, and we have E.
Yeah, I'm not following you. On the page numbers I have, like there's 11 and then dash, and they're numbered.
11-63.
11 dash what?
11-63.
Oh, yeah, I don't have, I think you have the entire document of the general plan, and so I think our enumeration is
Safety
different.
element, it's 11.4.
Yeah, we
after
have a
policy.
different document.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so maybe you can tell me what the goal is, unless, yeah, you're not able to share it on the screen, right? Okay, What is the
We have this
objective?
version.
the objective number?
Chair Limon, are you looking at the red line document?
Yes,
Or
I
the
am.
safety element document? So it's the red line document.
That's the safety element plan.
That is the changes that were made to the goals and objectives of the safety element. The safety element is actually an appendix of the resolution, or an exhibit of the resolution. So the full document. all the
So I'm looking at the wrong
is in
document.
that.
Thank you. Okay, it's in the full resolution, you said, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, and you said page 63?
Yeah, 11-63.
Okay, I'm getting there.
Yeah, no rush.
Okay, I am there. Implementing actions.
Yep, so number D talks about programs to inform and educate the community. And
Yeah,
then
that's
D-
educating. That's not actually coordinating and developing a plan.
Okay, yeah, C talks about city resources to provide the education as well. And then K, which is 2 pages from that, as a component of the emergency operation plans, develop evacuation plans, perform training around different evacuation scenarios.
Right, that's regarding evacuation.
Chair
Mhm.
Limon, if I could
Yeah.
ask for clarity, are you specifically looking to address the topic of donations? Or is it kind of larger coordination?
It's larger coordination around community response, mutual aid.
From community members or from
Correct.
agencies? Okay.
Yeah, particularly.
One thing I'd like to provide just a little bit of clarity on, I
Sure.
think also for community expectation, is the city may not be best positioned to receive donations and distribute donations.
Right.
When we were in the Emergency Operations Center, this was one of the topics of conversation during the mountain fire. There are private agencies, nonprofit agencies that are especially adept at this. And so one of the things that we really tried to direct folks toward is, hey, look at the Red Cross, look at a couple other agencies that for nonprofit organizations that were providing aid. This is what they do. They do this at a variety of different types of events or emergency situations, and look at what their needs are and try to fill those needs. One of the challenges for city staff and jurisdictional response was we don't have structure to provide that type of response. The focus is really on kind of, the government's responsibility in providing the response. It's fantastic. I agree with you. There was an overwhelming amount of community response, and it was great to see, and very heartfelt. I think the most efficient avenue to provide that is through these supportive types of agencies.
Thank you. Yeah, and I completely understand that. I just think that as part of the safety element plan, and maybe it's not that there is a role for the city to coordinate with nonprofits and to ensure that there's clarity for the community, because that is, immediately after the fire, there was this outpouring of support. And there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of confusion, and a lot of resources that were contributed. And again, those nonprofits were overwhelmed, and just didn't have they weren't prepared for that. They didn't have a system. So there's a gap there that needs to be addressed.
I agree with you. I kind of wanted to say that just for general community expectation. I think communication and coordination can be components of that. And if there was a communication gap on the city side, one of the things we were definitely trying to do is connect people to resources, both within, kind of city, county fire, Cal OES, as well as nonprofit agencies. I think that is language that we can look to improve.
Okay, I mean, because this is the key. The community response and support efforts are, in my mind, key to emergency response. Right, it's part of our community's emergency response. When people are at need and others are coming with food and water and supplies, blankets, et cetera, that the city cannot provide. And so it is part of our community safety element. And so I'd like to see some coordination, again, so that we can maximize the community support as part of our community emergency response. So where would that make it into the safety element in emergency response, so that the city is, there's some coordination, some resource coordination supporting community-based organizations?
I think there's already a lot of policies that support that, so we could put specifics in these implementation action sections. That speaks to that.
Okay, so is that language that you can develop now? Because the specific language that you read doesn't go to that, right? That's like on evacuation and
yeah, we could do either incorporating into the existing actions or make a whole new action. Like for D specifically, it says inform and educate the community of potential risk resources, and we could put including like emergency response coordination. Like we could put that within this action here. And I'm thinking like all the ones that are similar, continuing to put that language, like we could put that in D, we could put that in E, we could also put that in K and in L to make sure that it's reflected throughout.
Procedurally, it may make sense for the commission in its recommendation to provide broad direction and allow staff to find kind of an ideal way to incorporate it as we bring it forward to the city council.
Okay, but we wouldn't be able to review it at that point.
That's a topic that we could also discuss in the commission's recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. My eyesight's failing me, so excuse me. I'm now doing this thing. I also saw in extreme heat, there is language about cooling centers. Is that right? Okay. I saw language on both cooling technology and then cooling centers, and I wasn't clear on what the recommended policy is for cooling centers themselves.
Okay.
Or emergency centers.
Yeah, let me pull up the exact policy.
Thank you.
So there's policy SF 1.3B, which says continue to
Sorry, on
maintain.
what page?
It's on page 1149.
Okay.
Continue to maintain and add to existing cooling center infrastructure to provide public relief during extreme heat events and explore other options for public cooling centers within the city.
Okay. Okay, great.
And then there's also another policy on the next page, 1150, that says investigate new cool pavement technology, including costs, benefits, challenges, and opportunities. And then there's more policies that speak to extreme heat and doing adaptation at homes, looking at alternatives to air conditioners, and it gives a list of what those potential could be.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And as to this goes to air quality for personal protective equipment, I saw language in there, and I'm sorry, I worked off of the red line version because that's the new language that's being added, right? Those are the actual updates that are being made, or the red line version.
Yeah, I'm looking
Okay.
at the final version. That
Yeah.
one was just a version to show and track changes. What
Sure.
was changed?
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I understand. Okay, thank you. So as to the personal protective equipment, I believe there is language about partnering. How was it partnering with? It was just residents having access to the personal protective equipment. And I didn't see anything in there about partnering with, again, the hospital and other medical providers and schools for personal protective equipment. So with the school district or with employers.
Okay. I'm looking, trying to find that exact policy. Of residents. So you're recommending adding reference to
Yeah, with the schools to ensure that the
Schools.
schools have protective equipment for the students and staff,
Mhm.
as well as medical care providers.
Okay.
And also in the identification of vulnerable communities, I didn't see, and I think we should include, again, patients of medical centers and hospitals. That I think that was a gap. I think it did not also mention limited English proficient communities, areas of the community. I saw in there seniors, people with disabilities. There are some other categories. I don't think, or maybe is outdoor workers? Outdoor workers are included.
Yeah, these are all included in the climate vulnerability assessment, and there's a reference to that in the safety element, but we don't go in depth in the actual safety element text.
Okay. Yeah, so definitely for the personal protective equipment, I recommend adding those additional subpopulations.
Okay.
And also on the evacuation analysis, that also focuses on vulnerable populations. I think that I saw that gap as well, in that it doesn't identify medically vulnerable people, again, medical centers, or I don't think I saw a reference to schools either. I know schools have their own plans, but there should be coordination, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are my comments. Any other questions or comments by the commissioners?
I just have a question. If the goals to get this to the city council next month, would we be able to approve it or with the recommendations, or would it be better to continue it and bring back another draft with the recommendation? I mean, what, are we up against a time frame, or do we have time to do that?
Yeah, I have a question related to that. What is the urgency here? We saw the timeline there, and would it hurt to table it? I mean, Chair Lamone has brought up some well thought out and good points, things that should be in the safety element. And they don't sound like they would take a lot of time to add to the safety element, but there's enough of them in there to merit an additional review, I believe, by the commission. So what is the sense of urgency on, yeah.
I mean,
City want to answer?
I would suggest that there's no statutory requirement that gives us a sense of urgency. I do want the commission to be cognizant that the safety element does have to be approved by the Board of Forestry. And so depending on the amount of changes that we make, it may trigger another Board of Forestry review, which would probably add several months to the process as well. So it's just something to be cognizant of. I don't know that, Lexi, do you have any guidance on like what that threshold is for the Board of Forestry?
I would think the main threshold, if there's making significant changes to the policies themselves, from what I'm hearing, it terms more of clarification and some tweaking of policies. So I don't think that would trigger it. And I'm not hearing any taking out of policies. So that's what CAL FIRE would be more concerned about. So if it's the comments are what we have, I think we could do some technical updates to the policies, provide more clarification in the implementation actions, and then the context. And I don't think that would trigger that CAL FIRE review.
So that's helpful to know. So yeah, we could absolutely make some changes to the policies based on the comments we've received, and bring it back to the commission at a future meeting.
That would be very helpful. Yeah, and I appreciate the question. I have the same question about the time frame.
Yeah, because that way we get to take a look, because I guess if there was a deadline, we would approve it with the recommendations, but then we wouldn't have the opportunity to review them before they went to city council. So if there's time to do that, I think my preference would be to have it come back and look at a new draft before we approve it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Right, and that would also have red line locations where those changes have been made, right?
Yeah, in terms of
Red
from this
lines are the
version
red
you're
lines.
seeing today,
So
and if
we know
come back.
where the new ones are. Okay.
Okay, great. The other, another clarification, or maybe an additional issue is for emergency evacuation centers, and then we have cooling centers. I didn't see anything about having, ensuring that those centers or other areas in the city have backup power generators that don't rely on the grid. So ostensibly to be on battery powered for emergency charging or medical equipment that requires power.
Okay, yeah, we can do another sweep through and add clarification in the language and or point to maybe where that is already located.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you for your patience and listening to all of those comments and responding as thoroughly as you did. Any other comments or questions on this item? No, okay.
Then would we make a motion to continue this item?
So if I can interject, this is a public hearing.
Yeah.
So we'll need to open the public hearing, take any public comments, and then close the public hearing. And then based on if the commission wishes to have the document come back at a later date, I'd correct that. We close it, we just continue it open. So
Okay.
we don't
Yeah,
have to
that's great.
re-advertise the meeting.
There are, just want to confirm there are no members of the public who wish to speak to this item. Okay, great. Does the staff have any final comments on this?
I think the only city attorney could also help me here, but I would suggest continuing to a date certain. And as a date, I might suggest April 14th or April 15th, I think. Does that sound reasonable to the staff that's going to work on these changes?
So we'd recommend, if that's the course, we would look like May, a meeting
The
in
first
May.
meeting in May.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, then we will, so we have, is there a motion to continue this item?
Did you close the public hearing?
Yeah, we have to keep it open, still have another item.
Oh, okay.
That was just a
Oh,
public
okay,
comment
that's what you were
before
saying,
then.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, is there a motion to continue this item to May 18th or to the May meeting?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to continue this matter until April 15th or whatever date would,
May.
May? Okay, May 15th. You say April or May?
So we'd recommend May.
May, okay. And to incorporate the items that were discussed and brought forth by Chair Lamone, items that were agreed to be incorporated into the plan and allow the Planning Commission to review on a continued basis on May 15th. The amended document. And the amended document would have red line changes so that we would know where the new changes occur within the document.
And I'll second that long motion.
If I could just have a point of clarification. So the meeting that we'd recommend that we continue to open until the date certain would be May 6th. So the
Okay.
first meeting in May.
Okay.
I'll second that, the modification to that motion, so.
Commissioner Edsel,
Yes.
Chair Lamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
Commissioner Vandermeulen. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I know that extended our meeting and we're now past 7, but I hope that we will have an improved and clarified document to look at before our May meeting. Okay, so we'll now move on to our second item, which is a proposed conditional use permit 436 for the Chevron gas station alcohol sales. And the recommendation is to find the CUP exempt from seeker review and to adopt a resolution approving it, subject to recommended conditions of approval. And we'll start with the planning staff report.
Good evening, commissioners and member of the public, members. My name is Serena Gonzalez, and I am an associate planner with the planning department. Tonight, I will be discussing the conditional use permit 436 for the sale of beer and wine at an existing Chevron station. The applicant requests a type 20 alcoholic beverage control license. Per city municipal code, this requires a conditional use permit. The gas station is located at 255 Arneal Road in the Camarillo Commons area. The site has a general plan land use designation of commercial mixed use and a zoning designation of Camarillo Commons mixed use. The site is located in Census Tract 5502. The areas immediately surrounding the site are commercial, including auto repair services, stores, and restaurants. There are no parks, schools, or religious facilities in the immediate vicinity. Here you can see the floor plan of the market. The beer and wine fridges and displays are located in the back corner of the store. you can see on the left-hand side of the floor plan. In the middle of that floor plan where it says cashier station it's conveniently placed to kind of guard those areas so people can't easily grab and go. The alcohol will be, monitored constantly by people working in the store. The market is approximately 2,942 square feet with only around 50 square feet or 1.7% of the store, which will be dedicated to the sale of beer and wine. In order to approve this CUP, the Planning Commission must make a finding of convenience or necessity. There are currently 42 on sale and 10 off sale licenses in this census tract. ABC recommends 5 on sale and 3 off sale. However, it is important to note the size and zoning of the overall tract. So I'm going to go back to that map there. This tract stretches from Arneal Road to Las Posas Road and is bordered by Ponderosa on the north and Ventura Boulevard on the south. So it's pretty extensive. It's mostly commercial. There is some residential in there, but it's a lot of big commercial shopping centers. So there's not really as much of a concern as if it was, a residentially dominant area. So to go back. This project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15301, class 1 for existing facilities. And based on what has been presented tonight and the information outlined in the agenda report, it is recommended that the commission find the project exempt from CEQA and adopt a resolution approving the CUP 436. This concludes my presentation. I am available for any questions, and the applicant's representative is also here as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I have a question that we saw in the paper and stuff that the city council adopted some sort of resolution for liquor and gas stations.
Yep.
And does that impact us at all, or was this put in before that ordinance was put into effect?
Sure. So this application came in around December, so that was before the adoption of that ordinance.
Under that ordinance, that would not be permissible at this time, or at least because there's a moratorium on it, is that correct? But that, we're not affected by that in today's decision?
Not for this item, no. That would be anything that would come in after, but we're not taking applications at this time.
Yeah, and then I have a second question. When they make application for the liquors as part of the process, do they check with the police department and see if are they concerned at all about selling liquor there?
We do send all of our alcohol permits that come into the police department. They were not concerned about this one. Their only recommendation was just to make sure that all of the areas, were secured. There was a door over on the side that they wanted to just have locked down so that way nobody could get in and out unless it was staff.
And so that's contained in the conditions?
Yep.
Based on their input?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Vandermeulen? Commissioner Murphy?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that City Council was aware that there were prior applications, and they were made aware of that evening. I think I've already confirmed that through the city.
Yes,
I just
they
wanted to
were aware
go
of
on
this
record
one.
that they were aware. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I also want to clarify for the record and the community, anyone who's watching at home, that the moratorium puts a hold on any applications while there's a study undertaken on and examines any required or recommended updates to protect the community. Right. Okay. And the report indicates that the ABC license from the store that closed down, that could be transferred if renewal fees are paid before the license expires, which is 1 year after the store's closure. I'm wondering what that date is.
That will be May 2025. I clarified that with ABC just last week.
Okay, so it's coming up.
Yep.
So did they indicate that they plan on paying the fees to hold on to that
They
license?
haven't heard anything from any of the 99-cent stores, so they don't have an answer yet, but it's unlikely.
Okay. So the fees are not well, if the fees are paid, can they continue to hold on to that license even though it's not actually being used?
I believe they have to transfer or sell it off. I'm not totally sure on that though.
Yeah, they could actually, as long as they pay the fee, they could keep it going, keep it live.
Okay. And we won't know where it will be transferred to. It's just sort of
Right,
hanging
we
out
don't know
there.
if anyone's, eyeing that.
It's an idle license.
That license yet or not, but we're in constant communication with ABC and, we'll find out. Because we're one of the reviewing entities along with the Camarillo Police Department.
Okay, got it. Thanks. And so this would bring the license for offsite sales to 11.
Yes, it would be at 11 unless that other one was expired.
Okay, great. And also I'm just curious because I know this is a required finding is that there's public convenience or necessity, and that language is regularly used. And so I just became curious as to like what the nearest alternative is. Like how far would a person actually need to travel to purchase alcohol?
Yeah, as I had mentioned in the presentation, it is pretty concentrated, so they're not too far. This is more just so, if somebody goes in to get gas and they want to grab a beer or a bottle of wine on the way home, it's not really intended for high volume sales.
Okay, great. So it's not that it's inconvenient, it's just that it's more convenient.
Just require another trip. I mean, Smart and Final would be the
Right
closest.
across,
Yeah. The parking
walking
lot,
across
yeah.
the parking lot.
But it would require another vehicle trip to go there.
Maybe. It's a walk across the parking lot. Okay. I don't have any other questions. And again, there are no members of the public who wish to speak on this comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Edsel, did you have another comment?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. And any other comments from staff?
No.
Okay. Great. So I will close the hearing on this item. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a public. Oh, the applicant. Excuse me.
Hi, good evening. My name is Steve Rawlings. I am here on behalf of Mac Associates, which is the owner and operator of the Chevron on Arneal Road there. I wanted to state for the record that we do concur with your staff's recommendation, and we do agree to all of the conditions of approval that are presented to you this evening. I wanted to touch on a couple of things about this particular location here. I was really happy to see that Serena pointed out where the cashier station was. In terms of, what do they call it? Crime prevention by design. That's a kind of a buzzword that they use. This is really an optimal type of design because it allows the cashiers to be relatively close to every part of the store and be able to see and communicate with the members of the customers there. So that's a really important feature about this particular store. They have not had a history of having shoplifting in this particular store at this location. I think some of it is probably because of the design there. The other couple things I wanted to point out was you asked about the 99-cent only license. I know a lot about 99-cent only, considering I represented them for about 10 years and up and down the state of California. They've been in bankruptcy for a number of years, and they are in the process of trying to sell all of their licenses as part of their bankruptcy procedures there. Licenses can go into a status of what they call surrendered. So there's 3 statuses that a license can have. One is active, that means you're actively using it. The second is that you can cancel it, meaning it no longer exists. That license number does not exist any longer. And the third status is you can be surrendered, which is a status that a lot of licenses take, and it just basically means we're not using it, but we're trying to sell it to another user. I do happen to know that there have been multiple offers on many of the licenses that 99 Cent Only has. I can't speak specifically about this particular license, but I do know that they're actively trying to sell them. And again, that license could only be activated in that particular space. It's not like that license could be activated someplace else, unless, of course, it's going into a location that's been previously approved by a city that is legal to do that. But that's the story with that particular license there. I would also like to comment about public convenience or necessity. That's a concept that is a finding that needs to be made in order to justify ABC to be able to issue another license into a census tract. ABC's hands are tied by state law that says, hey, there's a maximum in any given census tract that they're allowed to issue without approval from a city. They do it by a mathematical formula. Most cities concentrate their commercially zoned properties into certain areas, and in this particular case, there's a lot of commercial property there. So it's not surprising to see that there is more licenses than what ABC is authorized to do. In terms of convenience, that is the number one thing. I would submit to you that having had 4 sons and my wife and I working, and oftentimes I've picked up kids from school and I'm headed to a soccer practice and I need to go get gas. The idea of filling up with gas and then making one more stop, even if it's across the parking lot or walking across the parking lot with 3 or 4 of my sons on board, is very inconvenient. And this is, just an ancillary item that's being sold to people that are already our customers that on a regular basis are asking for this type of product there. And it's a very common item that is carried in most gas stations. And again, it's just limited to beer and wine, and we don't dedicate a lot of space to it. So with that, I'm available for any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you. That was very informative. Does anyone have any questions? Any commissioners? Okay.
No, but thanks for the information.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. And thank you for flagging the public comment from the applicant. So we will now close the hearing. Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt the resolution? Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, it's a motion to adopt resolution number PC 2025-03, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo, approving a request from Mac Associates, care of Rawlings Consulting, for conditional use permit for the sale of beer and wine under a Type 20 beer and wine off sale alcohol beverage control license at 255 Arneal Road in Camarillo Commons mixed use zone, further described as CUP 436.
Move to waive further reading and vote to adopt.
I'll second.
Commissioner Etzel,
Yes.
Chair Lamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
Commissioner Vandermeulen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we will close the public hearing is now closed, and we'll move on to discussion items. There's nothing on the agenda, just want to confirm, no discussion items? Okay, great, so we'll move on to the director's report.
Wanted to thank the commissioners for all your effort and provide a comment on this. It's an important document that got your comments are well received and excited to bring back changes to you. You can look forward to more conversations like this around policy documents. The city's current policy documents are in need of refresh, and so you'll see additional documents coming forward. Likely the next one will be the climate action plan following the state. The April, getting back into a little bit more day-to-day business, the April 1st Planning Commission meeting we don't have any items tracking for it, so we'll cancel that. And that's not a joke. It's the April 1st meeting. The April 15th meeting potentially has an item, so we're tracking for that. Another kind of, and speaking of, some of the role of the commission, the Planning Commission serves as the landmark committee in the city's historic preservation ordinance, and we have a landmark request. And so we will be bringing that forward, and we do want to bring forward some discussion and background on the historic preservation ordinance and what it means for the commission to serve as the landmark committee. So that'll be coming up ahead of the landmark conversation. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for
Yeah.
the director?
And it's, my understanding, this is our last meeting in the library. We're going to be back to City Hall. Is that correct?
Thank you for reminding me of something very important. I'm sure you've all enjoyed this fantastic location. This is our last meeting here. That April 15th meeting, that will be our next meeting, will take place in the newly remodeled chambers. Was in there today, kind of walking through some of it. It looks fantastic. I feel like we're all going to be spoiled to be using such a nice facility.
Are we going to need some training for the new equipment or anything over there?
Yes, we will be doing that. Hopefully, there's a little bit less training for commissioners and a little bit more for staff. But as we get a little bit closer, and fortunately for this group, the city council will have the first meeting there. And so if there are any kind of kinks on the back end, we'll get them worked out for us.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Else we would have all showed up late, or at least I would have been up late. Great. All right, moving on to commissioner comments.
I don't have any.
I just wanted to thank the staff, particularly for all of the work that went into the safety element. I know that those are very long processes and do involve a lot of people, and the consultant who's no longer here, unfortunately, and appreciate the consideration of the comments and recommendations, and continuing to work on it to incorporate those comments and recommendations and bring it back. It is particularly at this time just such a critical element of our general plan. So just much appreciation for all of the work that you've done on that element, and all of the different policies that you're working to update. And also appreciation for the library for housing us during all of this time. And it's exciting to go into the new chambers. Okay, any other comments? Okay, we'll adjourn.